The LOOR TV takeover edition of Cross Politics starts now.
Hit him, Brett, hit him.
Are you just going to play with a soundboard all day?
No, this is our intro music. Brought to you today by 1689 Cigars.
One of the things when me and Jason travel the country and we're talking to artists and filmmakers and investors, we always set up camp at a cigar lounge. And one, because we find that the individuals who are not afraid to smoke cigars usually have the best stories, and the ones who are afraid of smoking cigars usually have the worst stories. And so it's just been a really good filter. But through that process, we've come to know about 1689 Cigars, which is, I think, a really amazing cigar, and it supports a great cause. It supports the missionary work out there in Nicaragua. And here's something about these 1689 cigars that you should know. If you are familiar with Drew Estate and that tobacco line, this tobacco is from the same fields and factory. So this is the premium line, Liga Privadas, that sort of line of Drew Estate cigars. This is where this tobacco comes from, and it is a phenomenal cigar. The Spurgeon cigars are really great. The green ones have a really nice bit of spice in it. The blue ones are a little bit more coffee based, but all the work, all the profits from this cigars go to help build out the church in Nicaragua so that the cigar money that usually comes from Nicaragua gets sent to the United States and doesn't go much into reinvesting in the community. So this is a way that the cigar industry can actually reinvest in the community through the local church. So great cigars.
Great
you
cigars.
Should get some.
I just smoked one of their Spurgeons last week, and two Spurgeon, I would say.
Go baptize your kids if you have children.
But other than that, I love me some Charles Spurgeons.
I will say, though, that there appears to not be any because they knew we were coming. I don't see it. Do you see them?
Yeah, no, they hid them.
Not even the boxes are around.
They didn't know we were coming because we snuck in and just broke in.
Right,
we broke in during the off hours in order to control for this episode. So, but we we have a really exciting topic to talk about, but David told us we had to go ask Candace Owens permission before we talked about it because it's a black culture issue. So we called Candace Owens, we got her permission, and we are going to be talking about In Living Color. Yeah,
more specifically, I think the independent black comedy revolution and why that's so important to, I would say, the reason Christian movies are so bad now.
Right, because we don't pay attention to the way God built the world. And so we don't see the way influential brands, influential IP, influential art is created, where it's created, how it's created, and how. So we don't know where to start. In recent times,
like the history of MTV. This is when we started. Actually, probably before we started LOOR. I was always reading entertainment history books from Nickelodeon to Food Network. The one on Food Network was one of my favorites, just how they built these major TV networks and how major TV channels. And the more I read them, the more I realized there's just this consistent theme throughout the entire, every book. It's this consistent theme is that it was low budget. It was made by independent artists who were given freedom from the executives, and that freedom that they had was the result of their success. So it wasn't the amount of money or that was really the main influence behind what they did. It was the freedom that they were given from the top down to really be able to do what they did.
Or when there wasn't freedom given, the willingness to go create your own space to put the art on, because the art that was underground, the art that was on the edges, whether it's jazz or rock and roll or punk rock or hip hop, whatever it was, it started out by the place where everybody could go and know that they were going to hear the truth because there wasn't an executive in the way somewhere trying to say, here's the message you have to send.
Right. So, but before we get into the history of some of these things, let's talk about where we're at now. And where we're at now is we have two industries, basically the Christian conservative industry for filmmaking, and then we have the secular Hollywood industry for filmmaking. And they've both become propaganda wings that emphasize an agenda more than just the good story. Right. And so when we look at Hollywood and what's happening with Disney right now, right, and DEI and Elon Musk and all that lawsuit stuff that's happening, Disney has essentially just become the liberal version of PureFlix.
They saw what PureFlix was doing, and they said, "Let's put a tail on that dog." And
right. Well, no. What I mean by that is there's always a preaching moment. Right. There's always that altar call moment. For Disney, it's to liberalism as the ends, where it's whether it's accepting transgenderism, whether it's accepting LGBT sort of narratives. And then in the conservative side, you always have that preachy side as well, where it's where you're talking about, you have your altar call to come to faith and say the prayer in Jesus as the ultimate ends.
Yeah.
And so that's what the entire. If anybody say, well, what's wrong with the film industry? Why are movies not so good anymore? That's the reason. Yeah. And it's because it's both sides, whether it's conservative or Christian, it's a top-down executive decisions that's really stopping artists from being free to just create good stories without that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the disagreement is about who gets to control the propaganda, not whether or not art should be propaganda.
Well, all art is propaganda, right? There is no neutrality. So all art naturally has a point and a purpose. But when it's inserted unnaturally, it's just not good. You could think of it, I was talking to somebody about like Jurassic Park, right? Jurassic Park is propaganda. I would say even unintentionally that humans are the rightful owners of the earth, right? And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, they don't realize they're saying that, but in order to tell a true story in that situation,
yes, in order for the story to relate, there has to be an ultimate truth. And so, like, obviously, they don't. That was not the unintended purpose because it was supposed to glorify science and evolution. But I think it actually had the negative effect and does the reverse. But again, like those messages come across unintentionally because all storytellers are ultimately bound not so much by what the executives want in the movies, but who they are as an image bearer in Christ. And so that's why unbelievers can tell good and true stories, no matter what.
Yeah, if they're effective as a story, it's because they have formed their story according to reality and craft, and so you can have unbelievers tell true stories still, but then when the propaganda arm is come in and it's paid for, you've got to put this in, or even just because they're a true believer in some false cause, you get something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where there's a lot of funny jokes and funny gags and some really heartfelt characters, but they just keep jamming the stories about gay rights stories into it over and over and over.
They gay it.
Yeah. They gay it. Yeah. Right. But it's a lot of it has to do with the executives doing the hiring. They hire true believers in those causes.
Yeah.
So they don't have to in every case. It's not as if in every case they're leveraging their power in order to make sure that they that this story is told versus that story, but they gatekeep who can come in as the storyteller. And what Christians have tried to do at different times is pretend that they fit that and sneak their way in, or they have tried to say, well, I'll be able to make it in because I'm good at my craft, and work their way up, and then they run into the it wouldn't be a glass ceiling. What would it be? A stained glass ceiling, probably.
Right,
they run into the stained glass ceiling. You can't go beyond here.
Right.
But they also don't see that their work then ends up subsidizing the system. Right. So they end up, now there's a whole system that's subsidized by that work, by ad revenues, by all of that.
Or you're talking about the He Gets Us stuff?
Well, that's a good example.
Yeah. So the He Gets Us stuff. They raised $450 million. that is just basically a subsidy of the secular advertising industry. It's big pharma. It's a Christian version of big pharma. Funds the exact same companies. $450 million in ad revenue. That's just what the purpose of it is to make Jesus more famous than Coke. But I think Jesus already is more famous than Coke.
Right.
So I think the premise off the bat was wrong and misguided. But but the point is, so we're just subsidizing all these things as opposed to really building out our own new infrastructure. So let's talk about, speaking of new infrastructures, in Living Color.
In Living Color.
So Fox, is this late 80s?
Early 90s.
Early 90s. In Living Color.
The revolution starts a little bit before that, but
should we go back?
Yeah, let's back up just a little bit, because it really started at the Tuesday night Comedy Store in the second room, right? They have 2 stages at the Comedy Store in LA. And there was
one run by Pauly Shore's mom.
Mitzi Shore was running it. She got it in the divorce, right?
Right.
From her husband. And so she's running it. Pauly Shore is a little kid. He's being raised in a comedy store, in the Comedy Store. And the thing's tanking. It's going out of business. They don't have enough money on a monthly basis. They can't get their bills paid. And so there was a comedy shop in LA. I believe it may have been destroyed by the LA riots. Okay. And the guy that was running that, he came to Mitzi and said, "Give me one night a week. I've got all these comedians. They've been successful over there. Give me one night a week here." And she was like, "Well, I'll give you Tuesdays and I'll give you the small stage." Tuesdays was the least successful night, and because nobody goes to comedy on Tuesdays, right. So she gave him Tuesdays on the second stage. And they were able to turn that into the most popular stage, really in the country at the time. There were just a handful of big comedy stages, but that one, if you could, and the reason was because when that audience showed up, they showed up for comedy, and if within 30 seconds you hadn't made them laugh, they would boo and hiss you off the stage.
Is that where Apollo? Is that where they got that from?
So they got that from the Apollo. So the Apollo was like that. Back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah. And so they said, this is the way, this is how the Apollo does it. And so we are the next big thing, even though it was a tiny stage on a Tuesday night.
Right. They had distribution.
They had distribution,
They didn't
right?
have distribution before then.
And so you had some really, really great comics come up through there. Martin Lawrence, you had Dave Chappelle was a regular there. You had a lot of who else was a regular there? But
Steve Harvey.
Steve Harvey was a regular there. You had but what happened was that was where the Wayans brothers got their start.
Okay, where's Eddie Murphy on this? Because he's
Eddie Murphy was before this, and he was the biggest black name. But what would happen was you had Bill Cosby, you had Eddie Murphy, you would have one-off successes
Eddie
in black
Murphy,
comedy.
In our analogy, Eddie Murphy is like Passion of the Christ,
right?
The Chosen, not that he's Jesus, but just the successful Christian film stuff. We have one-offs.
You have one-off, right?
This is really important to understand for where we're going.
Yeah.
So you have these one-off successful hits that isn't necessarily a functional, self-sustaining economy, but they're key hits. So Eddie Murphy was that.
So Eddie Murphy, he was a huge success. He had a couple of albums that were best, that worked their way up the Billboard charts, comedy albums. He was very, very popular, successful. He had a series of successful movies, and then you had Bill Cosby, right? So you had the two sides. Eddie Murphy Raw, where you couldn't listen to it with your parents in the room,
right?
Or the other way around. You couldn't listen to it with the kids in the room,
right?
Depending on what kind of family you were. And then you had Bill Cosby, right? Who was a mega success as a black stand-up comedian. His stand-up comedy was brilliant, really, really fantastic. And he had leveraged it into a huge success. And both of them had tried to bring other black actors and black comics along, and there wasn't regular distribution for any of them, and so they didn't have a pipeline for other black movie stars, black comics, black writers to join them in that success. So when Mitzi Shore, out of desperation, really started the black comedy night. It was called Fat Tuesdays. When they started that, it suddenly became the hippest place to be, and it started with the promoter. He would go to Kinko's and make a big stack of black and white photocopies because they're cheaper, and then go out and just hand them out in every different mall, every place around LA, to try and get people there. And then word of mouth kicked in. That's where the best comics are. And so then it really took off at that point.
So I think, the reasoning for this, one, we're talking about Fat Tuesday. You can put it up, Neil, the Fat Tuesday graphic this is from an Amazon documentary series. It's just the era of hip hop comedy. But the point is that there was this. So we went from having these one-off successes, which is what we have in Christianity now, to actually having just a consistent nightly way for artists to fail publicly,
right,
and to build a name for themselves,
and to work on their craft, and to build an audience.
This is why comedy is so important. And we announced recently that we got the Eric Metaxas's late night comedy show, the talk show. And one of his problems with finding a distributor was everybody wanted to read the script beforehand, and all the Christian networks wanted to make sure there wasn't any offensive jokes. And it's a late night comedy show. You can't do that with late night comedy. There's a lot of improvise. There's crowd work. There is the importance of having the freedom to be able to bomb and fail and know which jokes work and which don't. And so it just can't be done in a highly controlled environment. And so that made finding distribution. And we were the only ones that were like, well, dude, we'll let you fail in front of everybody. That's totally fine.
Yeah,
because we understand this.
Yeah.
We understand the importance of this.
So what created the Wayans brothers, Martin Lawrence, Steve Harvey, right? What created them as both performers and as writers, because they all are really talented, what was that in direct interaction with the audience, right? They could look at a joke that they wrote that morning, take it to the audience, say it, and know if it worked or not immediately. And if it worked, then they can say, what made that work? But then this joke failed. And so this joke was bad. Don't go that direction, go this direction. That immediate feedback loop that stand-up comedy gave them is what created the great artists.
Yeah, and we don't have this in church comedy. So when I say church comedy, I'm not saying Christian comedy. I'm just saying church comedy that's performed in a church building, usually an evangelical church. They have a comedy night or something like that. But it's very safe. There's a massive difference between a comic that is a Christian and a comic who is a church comic.
Yeah.
Our most of our distribution as Christians for the past 20 years has been, or more, actually longer than that, all the way through, I would say, Mike Warnke, one of the first comics who Ergen Kainerd, his testimony in Satanism is a whole different story. But starting with Mike Warnke, and then he built out basically what became Mark Lowry and Shonda Pierce and all. But that became church comedy. So
the church circuit.
The church circuit, yeah. So you would go and you perform at churches. You couldn't do anything remotely offensive. You'd never be invited back again. And you had to basically do comedy for church ladies.
Yeah.
And that, it got so bad that the church comics weren't even allowed to be seen doing regular nightclub comedy. And so basically we sequestered ourselves into this sort of church comic sort of thing that became a problem. It was a cul-de-sac,
and you want to buy a house in a cul-de-sac because it's a safe place for your kids to ride their bikes. Right. And we did the same thing with comedy, because you're never going to get booed at church. So you don't actually know if your stuff is getting better or not. But then too, it was judged based on what's not in it.
Right.
It's clean.
Right.
It doesn't have dirty jokes. It doesn't, then that became how you judged church comedy.
Right. As opposed to whether it's a well-crafted joke.
It's well-crafted joke. It's right. Cause you can write well-crafted jokes that aren't crass and all of that. But those jokes are going to work where jokes work, right? Versus at least it's clean. became
one of the comedians we
judge.
work with. I believe I'm saying this correctly. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but he said I could be a clean comic, but I cease to be a Christian comic, or I could be a Christian comic, but I cease to be a clean comic. Meaning that to be a Christian comic, he needs to make fun of homosexuality in his jokes. He needs to make fun of stuff that's offensive to those that are sitting in the church who are looking for the clean comedy, but the comic, he's not using comedy as a Christian should use comedy, which is to go after sin and to mock the things that God hates. Is that right? Mock the things that
yes.
So that's sort of what he meant by that, and I think it's absolutely true because when you see a Christian comic perform in a secular nightclub, as we've done a few times, they usually most always bring down the house.
Yeah.
Even when they tell gay jokes. I mean, so me and you, every time we travel,
and especially when they're mixed in with Bible jokes.
yeah. Gay Bible jokes are the best. But so when me and you started traveling, we would have these evenings where we didn't have much to do, so we started to go to comedy clubs, and we went to, especially in New York, we'd go to the Comedy Cellar, and we'd go to Nashville was the worst one we went to because that was a pride friendly, safe safe space sign on the door.
Space sign on the door. So I came in, I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And they said it's a it's a safe space for LGBTQ, and so where we're going to protect them. And so I went into the bar and I said, sanctuary. And the bartender said, that's not funny. I said, it was kind of funny though, right? He's like, no, it's not funny. And I was like, the comedy here is not going to be funny.
But it's their church comedy.
It's their church comedy.
Right, it's their church comedy, right? So, and that was sort of and then when we were at the Comedy Cellar in New York City, which is a famous comedy club, actually a comedy district. There's probably several comedy clubs on that same street. And we went there, and we noticed that comic after comic was just attacking homosexuality and transgenders, and it was just, we were like, where are we?
What is going on?
Where are we?
And this was not a Christian comic night. These weren't Christian comics. Well, one of them in the mix was a Christian comic.
Yeah.
But it was just, you just look at it and you think, oh, this is underground comedy where
this is where the culture's going.
Where the culture's going, because underground, and it's underground because the underground always punches up, right?
Right.
So
and remember, they took your phones away from you. They sealed them in a bag, and then the bodyguard signed his name over the envelope, and then you took the envelope to your table, and the waitress would check at all times to make sure that seal wasn't broken, because they wanted to make sure that the comics were safe to do offensive comedy, which turns out to be non-woke comedy now. And but then there was the same night there was this gay comic. This gay lady comes out and she says,
she says, where's my lesbians at?
And nobody raised their hands because nobody was a lesbian.
She's like,
I guess she expected 10%, but for some reason that number was wrong. And then,
she's like, how about bisexuals? Nothing.
Yeah. And one person said, I'm queer. And she said, you don't count.
She's like, you don't count.
And then she said, who wants to see my scar? And she just pulled up the side of her stomach, showed her scar, and then just walked off stage in defeat, because I think she realized she had a bunch of comedy that only appeared to gay people. And it was just the most amazing thing to see that fail, because you don't see that fail on networks.
Right.
You're presented, you're got artificial laughter for all that sort of comedy, and then you just to see it just fail, this is not what people want, was really eye-opening to us, and we need more comics and stuff that go that route. But
the way that comedy, that comedy like that, and the comedy at Fat Tuesdays, the underground comedy, the way that in the 90s that it burst onto the main scene was through In Living Color.
Right. Yeah. And so here's a point. You mentioned Cosby Show, which was it was an upper middle class family.
Yeah.
Where the race didn't matter. And when I say race, I'm not talking about color. I'm more culture. The culture didn't matter in terms of who the Cosbys were.
Right. I grew up watching the Cosby Show.
It's one of the best sitcoms of all time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And never thought twice about the fact that their skin color was different than mine because it didn't play.
And that was intentional.
Yeah.
And that's why it got the distribution it did. So then you have this underground comedy scene that's coming up. And now it's like, okay, well, and Eddie Murphy has his hit. And it's like, okay, well, what is the underground version of television comedy that will appeal to inner city urban communities? And that's when Fox was just getting a roll. They were just starting out, and then they just had Married with Children, which was actually white urban poor family.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, we'll do Saturday Night Live for black comedy. And that's where In Living Color comes up. And you can read about this, by the way, in Homie Don't Play That.
Neil, hit us.
Hit us, Neil. There we go.
Homie
Don't Play That. It's a fantastic
amazing book.
On the rise of black comedy. And why this is important is because Saturday Night. So Saturday Night Live was already off and running, and they were making stars and celebrities early 90s. And so you had this ability. Well, let's real quick. Let's take a pause and talk about the importance of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Because Saturday Night Live was already going back. So Saturday Night Live, you have this just tremendous mainstream cultural movement that is training artists, putting them on stage. They're taking them from the improv groups they're getting paid maybe $20 a night.
Yeah, Second City. The Groundlings, SCTV.
Yep. So this is the same place where Colbert and Jon Stewart,
Matt Walsh.
Matt Walsh was part of that? Okay, see, so he had to go into political comedy because
he had to go into information peddling
because there wasn't distribution for him to do. Man, that's tragic.
Isn't that tragic?
But yeah, so you had these things, and so Lorne Michaels would go to these improv clubs and find people and hire them, and then from that is how you get Adam Sandler, who's probably the most successful Saturday Night Live cast member of all times. But it starts out basically the whole process. We're going to take you from the improv. We're going to put you on TV as a background character for 3 years, and then once you're a background character, we move you to a full-time cast member.
Full-time cast member from day player to...
Yeah, and you're not making any money.
No.
all this time. And then eventually you become the main stage, and then you build a career. But and then from Saturday Night Live, you get into movies, and you get into producing, and like a big time sorts of like Tina Fey, Adam Sandler. You're talking about like this sort of things. But the point is that they had this whole underground process that was built to train these people out.
They had a pipeline where you could move through, right? If you
it's like youth pastor to pastor.
And you did without the difference being like one passed Greek and one failed Greek.
Right, that's right.
So you end up a youth pastor for life as you failed Greek.
Right, yeah. but we had the distribution time to train, to perfect your craft in front of people, to fail live on TV, and to bomb live in front of millions of people is turned Saturday Night Live into this 50-year multi-generational indispensable. I don't think even if the ratings are bad, it'd be very hard to stop Saturday Night Live, at least as long as Lorne Michaels is there. It'll be interesting.
50-year anniversary is coming up. It's crazy.
Yeah, he'll make it to that. But I heard he's training Tina Fey as opposed to Higgins.
We'll see.
I want Higgins. I'm rooting for Higgins to take over.
But I think he's...
Kenan Thompson said Higgins was the number one choice, but I think he's white, straight male, and it won't happen. I think it'll be TinaEy.
They already did him a favor by hiring his son. That's
all
how they say it. No, he's actually really... His son's really super talented. Yeah.
It's that white privilege of...
That's
inheritance.
What do they call that when you hire your own kids? Neil, what do they call that?
Inheritance.
Nepotism.
Yeah. Nepotism, inheritance.
Same thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So.
but you have what SNL does is it creates, it doesn't just, it starts by pulling people in. It's creating writers. It's it's sifting and sorting writers because you're getting that immediate feedback. But it also starts creating IP. Right, It starts creating. You get Animal
World.
House, Wayne's World. You get the that whole run of movies in the 90s that
Chris Farley, Dana Carvey.
That came out of SNL.
Not Dana Carvey. Was it Dana?
Yeah, it was Dana Carvey.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
it was David Spade.
David Spade. Yeah.
Chris Farley, David Spade.
Yeah. But Dana Carvey made movies, but they all bombed.
He did. He did a sketch series too.
He did. It was really brilliant, but it was on the wrong. They should have put it on HBO.
Well, they put it on after Full House.
Oh, I know. It was just the wrong. Well, they didn't know what they were getting, and then they got it and they put it in the wrong spot. If it would have been like Mr. Show,
that documentary series called Too Big to Fail, by the way, it's on Hulu.
That's a really good documentary. But Mr. Show, if they would have done the same thing, where Mr. Show was what, Monday mornings at 1 a.m.
Yeah, this is HBO.
The HBO put this over the top crazy sketch comedy show Monday with David Cross and Bob Odenkirk on Monday mornings at 1 a.m., which is the worst time slot ever.
Yeah.
But it was so experimental, they didn't quite know what to do with it, but they knew they had something. And all of the artists watched it and were inspired. The next generation, used to pass around VHSs of like it was like the Star Wars Christmas special, like, oh, I've seen it, but I saw it on VHS at my brother's friend's house, and then Mr. Show was the same thing. There were like floating VHS copies that somebody had recorded off of TV, but you couldn't find it otherwise. And then the moment it goes on to DVD, it immediately becomes a bestseller, and everybody says, "What is this?" Nobody's heard of it, but it's this 1 a.m. show. If they would have done that with Dana Carvey's sketch comedy show.
But I think the point is, though, that linear TV gave you low risk time slots, right, which was like after midnight, that sort of thing. And from those low risk time slots, you could fail. Yeah, right. There was time to fail. Late night television post, after Tonight Show hours. So, whether it was the early days of Letterman after Carson,
so the Late Show,
Late Show, or Conan. Conan had 3 years of just being awful. Yeah, before he started to really find his groove, and so basically the point is, okay, so that gets us to In Living Color, back to In Living Color, where there wasn't this in black inner city urban culture. Yep. There wasn't that sort of way for that sort of stuff to take off, and
because hip hop was still being passed around on mixtapes. Yeah. I mean, there was some that was getting through, but it wasn't what it is now.
Right, and so enter In Living Color by the Wayans brothers, and this book is really incredible. Description of not just In Living Color, but really just the issues surrounding black comedy around that time and how it grew to be able to succeed, and In Living Color being at the end of that, just like Saturday Night Live is. Yeah. But I'll let you go ahead and.
Yeah. So Keenan Ivory Wayans is the mastermind of it all, and he's the one that puts together the idea, the pitch for the show. He gets it there and gets it greenlit, and then hires his brothers because of nepotism. Exactly. Right? He hires his brothers. No, his brothers all are brilliant. Right? It's a whole family of brilliant writers, comics, just comedy minds, and then hires some other writers from the SNL environment, and they start and then they cast the funniest people at Fat Tuesdays, which included there were a handful of white guys that would go on.
Carrey?
Yeah, but Jim Carrey was one of them, and then the dad from Full House used to also
Bob Saget.
He was one of the only white guys that would go there too. But that's neither here nor there. But so they hire all these stand-ups that they had watched win over and over at in front of an audience, so they knew they had what it took, and then they gave the writers the freedom to do what they wanted, and the one rule was it has to be funny. Right. And so Keenan Ivory Wayans tells the story of, or no, some of the writers tell the story of bringing things that they thought would be really, important, where they're going to go after racism, they're going to go after something. He'd be like, it's not funny.
Yeah.
Your job is to be funny.
Not to be a
propagandist. Bring it back when it's funny.
Right.
Because he didn't care if a writer was putting a message in there. He cared if it wasn't funny, because the job was be funny. Right. We make people laugh. That's what this show is about.
Right.
But they also brought in hip hop artists into the mainstream to be the intro and they brought in outro bands to play them out. Tribe Called Quest, it was on the first episode. Then they put together a dance team of people doing the dances that you would find in inner city clubs and inner city parties, and that's that sort of thing. And so you had hip hop dance. So all of a sudden you have this full blown culture with the art, with the spray paint art, the dance, the music, and the comedy, the storytelling just showed up whole form on everybody's TV one night, all of a sudden. It rolled in and hit so hard because they had been honing their craft on the stage. They'd been honing their craft in those live venues for so long that they knew exactly what actually worked.
Yeah, and I think it's not an endorsement of all those things, right? Like, so it's not. We're not saying that these things are great and we need more of sexualized hip hop dancers in our culture. But the point is that there was the distribution for new things, and I would argue that because Christians haven't been given this freedom, and because we haven't had basically the distribution to be able to train up artists, to let them fail, to allow them to develop and build audiences, it really is the reason why we don't have success in the Christian film industry like we used to, especially with like books, when we had distribution filled out for books.
Right.
But once it came to video, our only distribution point was 35-year-old moms who shop at Lifeway Christian Bookstore. And then once those bookstores failed, we didn't have anything left. And so now we have an opportunity with streaming, which brings us to LOOR TV. Neil, and it brings us to LOOR TV, where really this is really what we found is over the past 3 years we've been building this. We've been meeting with artists. We've realized that everybody in the Christian film space and conservative film space, not just Christian, the whole anti-Hollywood campaign right now has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into movies and TV shows that are those Eddie Murphys. We want to get that one hit. We want to get that one hit. But what we don't have is the consistent distribution and the consistent way to test artists and to let them create content and to let them fail. And that's
and to build IP.
And to build IP.
Right.
Yep, and to build IP. And that is why I think over the past 3 years, we've learned that everybody's going in one way. They're still going after that 35-year-old female audience. And now we have a really great opportunity with streaming to create that niche Christian, conservative, faith-based brand in all the ways that's good and not in all the ways that's bad when you use the term faith-based when you're talking about entertainment. And so I'm very excited about the future of LOOR. And I think this one of the things we found, like we have a show like Barely Biblical, where it's animated teddy bears reenacting the most violent Old Testament Bible stories, and circumcision is whether the bear's got a nip in their tag or not, and blood is stuffing. It's just phenomenally done by a Nickelodeon artist, and it was rejected at every single pitch. They were like, no way, nobody wants to see. No moms want to see violent teddy bears. He's like, yeah, but it's not for moms. It's for kids. You've just been waiting to use that.
I've been waiting to use that. Yeah.
But yeah, so like that's the thing. Like, so instead of this is what Living Color did. They made content for a niche, and they tested and failed within that niche, and because of that, they were able to make fun of homosexuals. And what does that do? That normalizes homosexuality, right? It makes it part of everybody's culture, right? So, but they had that ability to do that, and so what we need is the ability for artists to be able to come in to put ideas that are counter to what the left is doing, to what the world is doing, and basically create that MTV punk rock art house for conservative entertainment, which we don't have. And so
and we don't have any way of building, right? We haven't, because we go out and we rent the pipeline of Hollywood to do everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this, because this is public. This isn't secret information. Kirk Cameron did that pro-life movie with the Kendrick brothers. Kendrick brothers were rejected from Sony, who bought Pureflix, by the way. They were rejected. Distribution. They didn't want anything to do with a Christian film. So they wound up just releasing the film as a Fathom event, and you've probably never heard of it because it didn't really go anywhere. It wasn't one of their most popular movies at all. And it was because, as the Kendrick brothers said, we were rejected from distribution.
Because they had to rent somebody else's hose, and the person saw what was coming and kinked it.
Yeah, right. So, everybody's still, we go to the Christian Film Festival, everybody's looking for the next theater run. They want their theater lottery. We call it winning the lottery.
Winning the theater lotto.
Yeah, and it's because this is going to be a $30 hit that brings in $300 million, or it's going to be a $10 million movie that brings in $100 million, and that's just, first off, none of that's working anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Nobody's going to the theater except for major big budget AAA films, and the future, I think now, especially with streaming, is that we can create low risk, independent artists, low budget, and many are going to fail. But the ones that succeed are really what builds the foundation of a greater economy. And we have that opportunity now. And my hope is that with what we're doing with LOOR is trains up amazing artists to go out into the world and to build bigger, better productions, and treat us sort of as, the Second City or the Saturday Night Live.
Because you don't, if we spend our energy aiming for a blockbuster, we are just guaranteeing that we aren't going to have any cultural influence, because blockbusters don't influence the culture. It's 100 underground comedians all pointing the same direction. It's a whole bunch of a small IP which means intellectual property, that builds over time until you've got a major influence. You don't get Marvel movies without 100 years of comics, without Howard the Duck as the first Marvel movie. All of those things that it takes to get to the point when you can make the Avengers. But the influence has, by that time,
you have 100 years of comic books,
right,
that can sustain the Marvel industry.
Yeah, because by that time, you've already had the cultural
and you
influence.
have Comic-Cons too, which was a result of G4 TV and Attack of the Show. That's another documentary. But so you have basically this TV network that went to Comic-Cons and broadcasted fans and showed people that Comic-Cons existed outside of LA because nobody knew about it. And then suddenly that became this nationwide thing that could sustain the infrastructure. Right. So it's not a matter of who's going to win, Angel versus Daily Wire versus The Wonder Project and the Erwin Brothers, right? It's not a matter of that. They all need to win.
They all need to win.
Yeah, they all need. We need lots of successes at that AAA level, but we also need the successes of the A24s, the MTVs, the early days MTVs, those sort of things, in order to build a sustainable entertainment culture. And it doesn't just happen. You can't, like you say all the time, you can't get a blockbuster by writing a check.
Right. Yeah. It's just, that's not the way it works. You get even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started in the early 80s, right? That's how old that is before you finally get, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 with Vanilla Ice.
Right. Well, because there's...
Which was a huge hit that made a lot of money. even as much as we look at it.
There's a mentality out there. We've come across it too.
Did we lose all our audio, or did we just watch? We lost. While we're trying to fix that, I just want to explain that today we're brought to you by John Cooper Beard Wax. John Cooper's Beard Wax, manufactured by Hawk and Hatchet. It makes your beard shiny. Check. We've lost a microphone.
This is horrible. What is this stuff?
And we're back after we broke a microphone, with the heat that we brought to this particular topic. So so this, I guess that makes this technically segment 2. You know, we're back in for segment 2, which will just be some wrap up points. I think one of the things that you've seen in Christian and conservative entertainment is that we think that what we have is an information problem, that we have a facts and data problem, that the reason that people have made the decisions they've made and are acting the way they are is because they don't have enough facts and data, and so we subsidize, or we put our money into information transfer situations, like you've got talk radio, you've got talk shows, you've got that sort of thing, and we've turned news into entertainment, and have forgotten the fact that most people, that's not how they're convinced, because it's not the only form of rhetoric where we've given up on stories. Neil, which camera are we on? Are we on this one right here? Or on this one over here? Yeah. So we've got and we're just starting to realize that, and conservatives and Christians starting to say, hey, stories are really powerful, and then they say, we really like power. Stories are influential. We really want influence. So what we need is some stories, but we're so far behind on the development side of things that
we're just we'll shortcut it and write a check.
Yeah, so we'll just shortcut it, and we'll just buy a big hit of a movie. We'll buy a blockbuster. But really, what we've got to do is we've got to lean into the way God actually made the world. And give artists the place and the ability and the distribution to be able to develop their craft. That the church should help them grow as Christians, right? Grow in their faith, and then they need a space to be able to really work on it and develop their craft, and then build some intellectual properties, build a fan base around their story, around a world that they've made, so that they can get to that next level, and eventually we'll get those blockbusters. It's always worked that way.
Yeah, we talk about all the time as we interview artists and talk to artists and meet different artists. You say there's two kinds of artists. There's ones that love the story, and there's ones that love the red carpet. And the ones that love the red carpet are dangerous.
Dangerous, yeah.
Because they'll quickly abandon their values and their principles for that red carpet experience. And so that's, but you could tell very quickly when you come across those two people and which one's which.
Right.
And,
and the left has learned how to use the red carpet to control the culture. Right? They have they're the ones that dole out honor. And the number of times you look at something and you think, they've got plans for that person because they haven't done anything to make it to the red carpet, but there they are on the red carpet.
Right.
But it's because they know how to use the doling out of honor to control the narrative and the culture and the story. And
and they also understand the value of IP,
right?
Which is why Soros bought Taylor Swift's music rights, right?
Right.
Which is not a conspiracy theory. Taylor Swift posted about it on her Instagram. No one talks about it anymore, but she told all her fans that Soros has taken her masters, and she got them back, which is why you have the Taylor's version of stuff now, but she's also a liberal now, all of a sudden. So, they understand the value of how to manipulate people who want that red carpet.
Right. And that's why they made sure to buy Narnia when it came up for sale. They made sure to buy Lord of the Rings when it came up for sale. Right. They made sure, and the only IP that we've been able to make successful is the biblical IP, the free most popular IP in the world. The only thing that sold more copies than Harry Potter is the Bible. So.
Yeah. which is the easy route.
The easy route,
And so
and there's I think it's important to that those are our stories. Those are important stories, but those stories historically have turned us into a storytelling people. Right, that's the power of those stories.
You also can't tell those stories with any amount of risk, because then you risk blasphemy.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
So that's sort of like there's no creative risk. There's a lot less creative risk available, especially with New Testament stories, than it is with Old Testament stories. But still, there's just this inherent lack of risk that's tied into, because you want to be faithful,
right? And hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
And you don't want to be faithful to Joseph Smith,
right?
You want to be faithful to Jesus.
Joseph Smith, right? That's correct. So that is, when we look at all the problems of Christian movies, Christian TV shows, Christian entertainment in general, we could have done a whole episode on Tooth and Nail Records.
Oh yeah,
and how they had actual masculine music entertainment that was outside of the K-Love
or Reach Records.
Reach for sure. Christian hip hop they bypass it. That was an example of Reach Records bypassing the K-Love distribution channels and going right to iTunes at that time, and they were able to create an audience for themselves without worrying about what the 35-year-old moms think of it, right? And so they actually appealed to younger audiences right off the bat. And so again, that's the importance of, it goes to that Bible verse too, where it says like, he who gains money quickly will lose it, but he who earns money little by little will never run out. That was a paraphrase of that verse in Proverbs, but it's essentially the case. We think we can just gain money quickly by writing a big check for a blockbuster, as opposed to putting in the hard work required over several years to build out distribution channels that free artists from the dangers of having to live in the world where the red carpet is always appealing to them. It's like South Park, right?
Right.
They showed up on drugs, wearing dresses, to the Oscars.
To the Oscars, yeah. To make sure they would never get invited back.
Right. But it's not an endorsement of doing drugs and wearing a dress. But I think what you said was, when you were thinking about that, you were saying like, the creators of South Park have consistently been able to churn out content that exposes the fraud of what Hollywood is,
right?
Because they don't care about that red carpet.
They can't be manipulated by the red carpet to tell the stories that they want them to tell, right? And so they instead have the freedom to tell.
They get $1 billion for South Park, and the first thing they do is buy their old Mexican restaurant in their hometown.
Yeah.
And renovate.
They're like, oh, we can actually move back to Colorado. Hooray. We can leave LA behind.
But no, that's the key.
Yeah.
And so
and I think on that full-hearted South Park endorsement, we should probably end.
We should. They're making us introduce
our sponsor,
Pub.
which is
TV.
Pub.tv.
Join the
you can
FLF
join
Pub,
the FLF Pub, our favorite competition. No, actually, we need everybody to win.
Yeah, we need everybody to win.
We're not socialists.
Yeah,
this is a world where resources is not a problem. There's plenty of space.
That's a great point.
So we're really excited about the FLF Pub and Pub TV and Pub University. If you haven't checked that out, there's great classes there and great shows and a lot going on for the
Are you
FLF
teaching a
network.
class on there?
I just finished one class and I'm about ready to announce my next class.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're not now? You're not gonna...
I haven't announced it yet, but we do have up there right now. We've got a rhetoric class. We've got a class on an animation class that's that's just gone up
Taught
there.
by who?
I wish I knew off the top of my head, but we literally just put it up there.
Okay.
So Neil, we don't need to edit that out, but unless it's really easy for you. But we're really excited about what's going on at the FLF Pub. So join the pub. Check us out at LOOR.TV, LOOR.TV, and sign up. And There's a lot of really exciting stuff going. And on that, our theme music will take us out.
Aren't you supposed to say something about baptizing babies?
Oh yeah. And I'm supposed to also say,
Go baptize your kids if you have children.
if you got kids, baptize them. And then
If you're married,
if you're married,
if you're single, get married.
If
you're married, have children.
If you have children, baptize them. Nailed it.
Nailed it.
If stories are soul food, and they are, this world of starving souls needs many, many more true and good and beautiful stories. For those stories to exist, the world first needs more storytellers. Storytellers with every aspect of their craft firmly rooted in the only possible source of truth, goodness, and beauty. Storytellers who are more interested in imitating and honoring the one true storyteller than they are interested in this world's acclaim. The Camperdown Writers Kiln at New St. Andrews College. Limited enrollment, low residency, Christ-centered. Currently seeking men and women to help us feed the world. Apply now